Thank you everyone for coming along. This is the second talk of three. We'll have another talk this Friday with two filmmakers, Saskia Vermeulen and Gareth Nolan, who've been working on a film on painting for the last 2 years. But today I'm with Robert Armstrong, who's head of painting in NCAD, and Paul Hallahan, who is a painter, and he also has a kind of history in curating as well and doing other projects. They both have works in the show right here now, and we're going to talk about stuff. Myself and Robert curated a show 5 years ago in Temple Bar Gallery called Making Familiar. And it was a 6-week show, and it had 12 painters in it, and they rotated every week. A pair of painters rotated every week. And we had talks, 6 talks over the 6-week period as well. And this one is kind of, this exhibition here, Soul Beating, is kind of an extension of that in a way. But it's over a 9-day period. So how do you feel about being in the show? Similar to the show you created before, and then talking? Not posing the questions.
Yeah, I feel better about it, actually. I mean, I think, to be a painter, for me, is more interesting than to be a curator. And it's always great to get opportunities to get to work out in different contexts, surrounded by other artists. It was interesting for me as well that you were going to come and select work, and with the soul beating idea, which actually related to the Making Familiar show as well. It was a useful opportunity, I suppose, for me to pull out unusual works for you, because you would have been aware of a lot of the other stuff, but and I was really happy that you kind of went for slightly oddball pieces, pieces that I suppose are not like the majority of my work, even though my work ranges dramatically across different styles and ways of working over, I suppose, a good number of years, so what you ended up with here are sort of monochrome sort of paintings where the colour is greatly reduced, which is complete opposite of the last show I was in last January with Anna Bjerger, where some of the paintings in that were deliberately highly keyed and looking at I don't know, Bouillard and artists who make particular use of colour. So this is kind of a much more somber affair, in terms of my participation in it. That's not to say that all of the paintings in the show are somber, but I think that there are a number of paintings that are quite somber, like Paul's one over there beside that one. It's interesting, the pairing of those. And I think Kieran Murphy's paintings are definitely somber, with the colour bleached out to some extent. And it's kind of interesting, that the kind of things I think about a lot in relation to painting are always formal things, like about colour or about materiality, about those sort of things, much more so than I think about content or, narrative or figuration or I suppose meaning in inverted commas. So
I suppose it goes back to this question, like what I said first, is it easier just to, rather than to construct like we did in Temple Bar, to be part of something rather than to construct it? Because I found this exhibition kind of draining. It takes a lot of work. Yeah. And this goes to you as well, Paul, someone who's worked with projects, constructing projects, and then getting work selected rather than you know, constructing the project yourself, all the energy that goes into that. Like, how do you feel about participating in a show like this of painting?
I enjoy it a lot more.
Yeah.
It's a different part. There's a different payoff. To any of the curation I've done, it's kind of like a separate idea. While I'm in the studio, it can be, there's a different mentality, and then I'll just come up with some kind of idea. It's like, okay, I want to see. There's like certain ideas I had. Like there was one show I wanted to look at a Genesis album from 1974 called "A Lamb Lies Down on Broadway" and put that together as an exhibition, because I kind of thought, okay, there's something within the structure of the album that I thought was relevant to how I was thinking, and then maybe that could be presented. So in a way, all the work involved in an exhibition like you're doing here, for me sometimes they can kind of feel like art pieces as well, which it's not something you should be saying when you're curating, but but it does. There's a payoff in a similar way. It's like for me with curation. So I think that's why I eventually stepped away from it, because I kind of found that I was getting an artistic reward out of curation when I was like still not making my own work as much as I should be. And so I kind of stepped back from those projects. I've done one last year in Dublin, but that was an easier one. It's not as public. And 2 years ago, I made the decision to just work on my own work and see what that freedom allowed where my brain or my ideas to go. So, but definitely between the two, no one grows up wishing to be a curator. Everybody wants to be an artist. So, for me, that's what I think anyway.
What about having a painting show? Is that a problem, having a painting show?
They are paintings. I don't necessarily see myself as a painter. I know it's kind of cliche to say that, because I was even thinking on the way down here, there's certain artists that wow me that aren't painters, and there's certain artists that cross over. Between, say, two of them, I was thinking of Pierre Huet, blows me away. But he's making images. He's making scenarios. So I think certain paintings can be that. And then say an artist that transfer between installation and painting will be Mike Kelly. But but from his formal training, it's painting, and then he goes into installation and some of his video stuff. But it's all image based, and I think everything outside the human brain is image based for the most part. The only difference would be then music, and I think most artists, enjoy a lot of music because it's the one thing we can't control. It's just a different sense that we're working with. So, but for me, being a painting show, it's an artist show for me. That's the way I see it. Like it's pigment and binder and images. So that's why.
Robert, are you a painter or an artist?
Well, you know, that's one of the key questions, isn't it? I mean, it's at the basis of everything that's happening, I think, within the art world, and that relationship between painting and art and how that works. But that whole debate has been raging, at least since the 60s, or probably even earlier. And there is no answer to it, you know, but I think it's a fundamental failing, not of artists or not of painters. It is a failing of theorists and curators, that they're kind of bogged down in, you know, they can't see painting as being conceptual art. And sometimes painters fall into that trap by doing all sorts of weird things to foreground the concept not at the expense of the painting, but they foreground it in a certain way to make it more palatable to curators, who frankly mostly don't get painting at all, because they're you know, they don't want to talk about the materiality or how paintings are made, or the kind of inherent language of painting, and they will talk about the context, and they'll talk about the content in literary terms or philosophical terms, but not in the material terms. I mean, I've been kind of interested in that debate for so long, and I'm not ever hoping that an answer to it is going to be found. So in the meantime, it's kind of like all I can do is get on with some painting, and just, do the best I can with that. Really, so.
Yeah, there is something about that. Like, over the last few years, I've been interviewing painters on film, and every time I call them a painter, they kind of go, "Oh, I'm an artist." There's an absolute kind of reaction to it. No, I'm an artist.
It's an insecurity.
And I came across this. I read kind of lots of history stuff, and but this is like Michelangelo wrote this poem. He used to write these brilliant poems where he's saying, like, really grumpy poems about shitting blood for his art and stuff like that. But at the end of one of his poems, he says, he's at the height of his fame, or as we know his fame, as an artist, or as a painter, or as a sculptor. He writes, "I am not a painter." At the end of it, "I am not a painter," and he isolates the word painter from sculpting or from everything else. He says specifically, "I am not a painter," and this is when he celebrated, I suppose, doing the Sistine Chapel, painting the Sistine Chapel. He just had this doubt he had no doubt about being a sculptor, but he had doubt about being a painter. And I suppose I'm always interested when painters come back to me and say, "Well, no, I'm an artist," because it kind of covers more ground.
It also gives you. I was thinking about, because this talk I've been thinking about it. It's like there's, especially even the term painter, like within the art world, it's painter. There's a few circumstances I would have used the word painter, and in kind of normal day life, people would go, like, as in house painter or interior painter.
Yeah.
And then I realized, even thinking about this yesterday, that we live in a world that is painted. Everything that's human is painted. But within an art sphere, you're trying to, in some ways, bring in nature or ideas or thinkings within your own head that aren't man-made. Some way, so like even this room, everything's painted. So I mean, just maybe the term sometimes can be, well, it can lose its value. But an artist is generally quite simple. You can say, well, I'm in a realm where I'm not going to be thinking, I'm going to try and think outside the box, which is what I think an artist can do. So, and even sometimes there's a trapping within your materials that sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes you can be forceful, like, I am only a painter, and that can ruin where you can actually go. You can go to different places. Not necessarily film, not necessarily photography, there can be other things. But other times, like for me, like painting, I enjoy it. I enjoy parts and materials, but I don't really go into the over-analyzing of why I'd use certain things, or getting too nerdy about certain materials or certain types of paint or certain types of brushes. For me, I have no enjoyment out of that end. I just kind of, yeah. So I mean, maybe that's the term. I'd say artist and painter. I think within the kind of the family, it's artists, and then there's certain little groups within that family. But I think that's a grey zone. There's no absolutes. So, and maybe that's what you're talking about, Michelangelo.
Yeah. I suppose I romanticize about this, about the 70s. I was talking to you the other night. We were having a few pints after the opening, and I was talking about the 70s and how all these artists came together, and they were musicians, they were painters, they were doing everything. And they didn't define what they were doing, they were just creating stuff. And they called themselves like the Fab 500 in New York, and they didn't distinguish between painters. They were doing everything, filmmaking, yeah.
He lived in Dublin.
McGough, is it?
Yeah, and like he's McDermott Gough, and they're like best friends at Basquiat or something.
Yeah. So there was no distinction, And then there's Basquiat coming off the street, doing graffiti, writing stuff. Then he's painting canvases, and you know what I mean. So, but something happened, I think, in the 1980s, through either education or the art market, and started to, break up that a little bit. Yeah.
So you're kind of, you put that into Japanese system where like even like Yoko Ono and stuff, and what's her name with the dots, like there's such a variety of like that's Eastern thinking coming into Western art. So, but I mean, I don't even say she thinks herself as a painter. Yeah, 90% of what she makes is a painting.
Yeah. Do you think most painters Like, even the painters in this room, do they define themselves as painters or artists? When you commit to something over a period of time, like Robert, you've committed to painting for a very long time.
Yeah, but
on canvas.
Yeah, but I have made some video works and I have done other things from time to time as well. And I just think with limited time, it's sort of more interesting from my point of view to focus on one thing and to go deeper into that one thing. And I mean, I like what Paul was saying about like sort of allowing things in and all of that. And Fergus Feely talks a lot about that, about letting things into the work as a kind of a methodology. And I think that is great too. But you know, I think that just going as deep and you know, without excluding things, you know, the two things are not mutually exclusive at all. Actually, you know, and I think in reality, I certainly don't regard myself as limited only to painting, but I choose to kind of work in that way, you know, just because they are the materials I have to hand. It's what I know best, and what I hopefully can extend and develop, and find change within that, you know, without necessarily. I mean, I'm interested in painting in the expanded field and stuff, and like how that comes from a kind of a conceptual place and sculptural background and all the rest of it. And I've seen lots of shows that have painting as their primary focus that make enormous efforts to migrate towards the world of installation, or the world of video, or the world of what used to be called sculpture. And I think all of these things are hugely interesting. But what usually happens in those contexts, I think, is that individual paintings don't read as individual paintings or as objects. They read as part of a much wider setting. And that seems to me to contradict some of the urges that are fundamental to painting, which is the engagement that you have as a painter with what's going on within that rectangle that you're probably working on at the time.
I was actually, for some reason, like when you started there talking, I was thinking rectangles. The limitation, I think, with painting is, for the most part, rectangles, and even though when I said like I'm interested in bringing everything in, I limit myself to a lot of things, and you have to have these rules set up. I think with most painters, the limit is rectangle. It starts with that, and then it goes into material, and then it's like your choice of paint. There's always limitations, and you can only fine-tune certain areas, and then it can be concepts or techniques or something. But because perfect example is the internet. Like, you can go look for anything. You can spend all your time looking for stuff that has no interest, and you can end up just doing nothing. Or you can actually just be specific, that's the word, on something, and see how far you can get that to grow or move. And I think, that's why maybe it's just, I don't say painter, just, it's probably some sort of tick I have, but I know what I'm doing. And like even the materials I'm using inks because I have little ticks about it. But I have used oil and I have used acrylic and I know how to use them. It's not a big issue, but for these ones they're inks, but they're just another pigment, a binder for me. So it's ends to a means to an end. But I mean, it's interesting. But you're kind of talking the same stuff. It's like it's limitations. It's
but I think imposing limits is probably a good thing. I mean, musicians do it, writers do it. You know, people choose to work in particular formats, in particular ways, it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? Because if you consciously limit yourself, it is at the expense some form of exclusion or something, you know. So it's like you're having to bet: is it going to get deeper, better, more interesting through limiting, through intense focus, or does it get better by opening out completely?
You can go both ways. You can
It
go,
can,
and
yeah,
that's,
yeah,
like,
yeah.
that's what you said. Time is a thing you mentioned a minute ago.
Yeah.
That is becoming, like, as I get older, it becomes apparent. There's only 7 days. There's only 24 hours. I don't know how much time I can spend working on things. That you think that freedom, like at the moment, I'm in a position where I'm in the studio a lot, and even that freedom, I'm still running out of hours in a day, and all the little things. It's like, shit, I'm spending time messing with this, but I need to set aside time to do nothing and not think. And I'm interested how quickly time moves. And even though I'm giving myself ideas, like I need to do certain amounts of work, I still run out of time. And so that's why I think we're being specific or giving yourself limitations is a way of getting the most out of.
Yeah.
I suppose like that's, it's the limit that I've been interested in here. Like I was very wary of having, as you say, expanded painting in here, like an object on the floor that looked like a painting but was away from the walls, and that's why I didn't select an artist that would do that. I wanted everything to be on the walls, they were limited within the frame, and then there's a tension between the two paintings, two individual paintings or individual painters coming together. And like when myself and Emma were hanging today, when you put up two paintings by two different people, and you pull them apart and you close them in together, something magical happens. You know what I mean? If they're too far apart, they don't energize each other. If they're too close, they kind of destroy each other. So does these kind of things happen? So this exhibition is very limiting in a way.
That's also, like, you're probably picking up those things. Like, I'm very interested in how the human brain or how it sees things. I think that's unlearned notions that, like, by your choosing of certain paintings, that's resolved in most of our minds as well. And how does that happen? And you can't teach that. So I'm quite interested in, like, having that freedom or that relaxation of being able to go with that and see, okay, this works for a certain reason. I'm not going to overthink about why it works, because basically I'm in the same, for the most, like, again, there's certain cultures, there's certain different ways of how we read things, but for the most part, say in Ireland, you're going to read it from left to right. You're going to read it from big to small. There's certain ways, and then like, I'm just thinking of these two paintings here, like it's like they are balanced, and that's, for me, always interests me. Of like, this,
seems to be what you're talking about is something Robert mentioned perhaps earlier, and that's the language, whether you speak English or Irish. You either read the language or you don't. There's a few very interesting points I think coming in there. For instance, the notion of the artist as opposed to the painter. I really want to see how. No, I totally concur with the panel on how you responded to that. But I think what's really exciting for me, at least anyway, is to walk in here and see those images and read them as I would a book, coming back to the language of paint, which James, I think, in what you set out to achieve, if you like, with the show, and this wonderful change which I'm just seeing for the first time, I think we're very fortunate to have this here, to be in such a position. One thing that struck me when Robert was talking about the artist and somebody was talking to the earth. Absolutely nothing to do with painting. But what would we do with Leonard Cohen? Is he an artist? Is he a poet? Is he a pop star? Is he a...
it causes chaos because our recollection of what a poet is not related to music. But now, like, it's been in my mind all year. It's like that changes everything. And like what we always assume is like So even with music, it's like, what is pop music and what is like how does Dylan relate to Stravinsky or something like that? On one side, we're supposed to be told that this is more serious, and on the other side, this is less serious. But him getting a Nobel Prize changes all that, and I think that's quite interesting because it opens everything up in that kind of level. So you're saying Cohen, of course he's relevant.
I came to Cohen at 14 or 15 years of age because I'm that old, so or he came to me through a little pressed little box, one of those very primitive early things that you would click on. But I got him straight away. I never found him to be depressing. I found him to be quite uplifting. I found him to be totally engaging. Just on a comment, I'm sorry now, if you tell me to stop. I was here yesterday when Emma was on with Jamie. It struck me that why I'm using the Cohen analogy there is yesterday I was talking with James and the panelists about the notion of where do you put, if you accept, for instance, a certain position on what painters even should be doing now, you know, how do we contend with somebody like Arbach? I'm thinking of, saw a wonderful documentary recently, and the rigor and the vigor that he brought to his practice is surely undeniable. You know, he's still with us, isn't he? Not today. Somewhere out there. It seems to me, and I think Robert, you touched on something there earlier on that would be a concern to me. That soul focus, that almost manic kind of digging and singular push and madness, call it whatever you like. I think that's still so relevant. What seems to me to be happening is there's a case in which painters, perhaps, I'm just throwing this out here, painters are responding to something that is, at my age, the old dinosaur that I am, are responding in some instances to the notion that they've got to change. It's not a question of, you know, I did a show 3 years ago, so hold on, how am I going to, almost to quote your lack of trust in the curatorial or the
I mean, in talking about an individual artist, especially an artist as old as Frank Auerbach, you know, how when we approach that work, we bring our knowledge of all the work that we've seen before to the new work or to the recent work or to the particular show, you know, even if it's a retrospective and stuff. So we bring all that knowledge to it, there's a clear division, I think. Sort of artists who work over a very long career in a certain way, they do that thing that I was talking about earlier. It's like intense focus and stuff like that. That way of working is not so popular, I think, with younger artists anymore, and it has to do with the climate we're living in, the sort of opportunities that they're going to get, building a unique personal style. It is not the number one thing on the agenda in the way that it may have been, you know, 40, 50 years ago.
What happens if the conceptualists start to paint?
Well, they already are.
No, which is starting to become, I'm starting to realize a lot more people that I would have
Yeah.
never seen as having a painting practice are like,
Yeah.
and I think it's just so many factors, but I think people just eventually get to the point where a talk or a situation is not doing it for them anymore. And they go, well, actually, most artists come into art through painting or sculpture. Mostly painting because I guess sculpture is a little different than like, if you're talking like say books and stuff.
Yeah.
This doesn't translate as much. So I mean, what happens when they come in and they start painting? Well, like that's why I find sometimes there's a painting castle where everybody's in a painter, and then if someone else comes in and actually does a show of good paintings, but they're not a painter, what happens?
Yeah.
Are they taken seriously? Or
Well, you see, they're appealing, I think, to a different kind of conceptual, critical audience or something. You know, it's like somebody who's well known as a conceptual artist who suddenly takes up the paintbrushes. You know, the question of the quality of the work or how it's made or any of that is irrelevant because the baggage they're bringing to it, and the ideas being the thing, are irreproachable. Probably they're probably really carefully worked out, packaged, and all the rest of it. So how it's made is not so important. Most painters, I think, are really careful about how things are made. You know, really, really careful about that, and that is part of the pleasure and part of the enjoyment in it, part of the enthusiasm for it. It's not big on, I mean, no names, but I remember talking to a theory guy who teaches in Dublin, let's say, a long conversation about work of an artist who I won't mention either. But anyway, but it was like as the conversation went on, I realised like that this person I was talking to didn't actually know what the material he was looking at was and how it behaved in the way and why it folded in a certain way and why it did a certain thing. And a colleague of this person sort of appeared on radio some months later talking about another a really well-known international artist, and said that there were wonderful oil paintings where, you know, all of that artist's work is made in acrylic. You know, so it's kind of like, you know, that careful attention to materials bypasses a lot of critical discourse entirely.
And why is that?
Because it's irrelevant, because the idea is God. The idea behind the work is more important than the work. Really.
Yeah. So feeling like, I suppose like I was saying yesterday, and for those of you who were here yesterday, I'm repeating myself, but I was unpacking the works, and everyone has a different way of packing them, different smells, different, you know, all these different things have different, especially different, it wasn't the images actually, it was the textures and how people applied paint. That was, because you're up so close to them, they weren't on the wall yet, so there were these objects, and they all had individuality in a way. They had a kind of humanness to it. And so that like I knew I was excited by that because I was it wasn't like I was getting the files across online or through WeTransfer or something like that and putting them onto a TV here. It was much more, I don't know, there's something human about it, the whole thing, the whole exercise. And that's why I've been putting across this question of the painter. Because I'm everything, you know. I write, I do all different things, but I'm interested in painters and that embodiment of being a painter, and not pretending that, you know, you're doing other stuff. You know, I value all that stuff and I value other artists. I'm just saying this is a painting show about painting within the limits of the frame, within the limits of the notion of a painter. It's very much about painting. It's a very kind of conservative idea, perhaps, about what painting should be and how you should present yourself, but it isn't just about painting.
Like the smells and stuff, I guess. Yeah, that's part. Yeah, because I would have noticed that. Because I ran a gallery for a few years, and I'd be interested in certain ways of seeing what works came in. And especially if you're not around oil paint for a long period of time, the smell of oil paint is quite different than most smells, or turpentine, or than anything you're going to hit day to day. So I think people sometimes get quite excited about smelling oil paint. They're just not sure what that smell is, especially turpentine, because it's not used in everyday stuff now. But like the materiality, like I think it's important. Like I'm quite conscious of it. Like even looking at all the works, I'm analyzing, and it's probably like one of the things I have with the work I've put in is I framed them because I needed to stop myself looking at the sides, because I do it all the time, and I didn't want the sides to be looked at. I needed it to look straight on, and that's and that was a decision. So I'm really like I do think about those details. I think most artists do, but it's like those textures. I think like there's an image, and then there's a texture, and there's an object to a painting, and I think like artists get very connected to the object. But I also do it with, say, paper. I like working on paper as well, and there's certain things I like about how it works, and like there's definitely smells down to the paper, and so like you're coming from a point of view that maybe you're not in a studio all day, so smelling these things, and then obviously 14 different people with 14 different ways, and 14 different rooms with 14 different smells, with 14 different types of wrapping, and yeah, it's quite a lot, and it's like it's probably like opening up. Do you know that smell when you walk into somebody's? I know certain people I would have hung out with as a kid, their houses smelled differently, because their mother might make stew and my mother doesn't make stew, and I guess you just opened up 14 different smells that it's like, which yeah.
I mean, you used the word human earlier on, and I think that's kind of really interesting as well, because I think that you know, maybe it is because of smells and visceral things and all of that sort of bodily stuff and human stuff. There's a direct connection, I think, between painting and some of that. And I think that paintings do have an ability to appeal to the emotional side of the brain as well as the intellectual side of the brain, or something like that. There is, and I think that over time, and paintings repay time that is spent with them, and that how that works. If you're looking at a painting that is basically abstract, and it is made up of colors and shapes, and I don't know, either, you know, shiny bit, matte bits, flat bits of texture, thick impasto, all of these kind of things. How these experiences that we're looking at are impacting on our mind. I mean, it's a kind of a wondrous thing, actually, that it works in that way. And that's even outside of the way that when images are created using these materials, how those images relate. But like, say, the image in Mark's painting there of a figure sort of hidden behind all this dripping and stuff like that. It's like, how are we supposed to read that? You know, we could posit all sorts of intellectual stabs at what it's about, and is the figure behind a grid, or it's not? Of course, it's not a grid because it's drips and this. So how are we to interpret it? But like, the first thing that we can say about it is that it has a powerful kind of physical impact on us because of, I don't know, something to do with the way it is in the world, I think.
No, I definitely think there's an emotion. Like, I'm fascinated with how paintings can give emotion. Because I had to go back to the studio 2 years ago, like, and from going into kind of more gallery stuff and different things, I had to kind of separate like what I wanted out of work. And I kind of just one stupid like romantic kind of ideas in my head. I wanted to see if I could make artwork that felt like a tree blowing in the wind. And it was just that you don't question it, you just look at it. And it does something, but you're not sure why. But then the fact that you're questioning it is actually what it's doing. That you're questioning, why does this look so good? Why are the greens this color? Why are those, like I'm just even looking at that, I'm thinking like branches moving. Why are those branches there? Can you see the history of why the tree moved, how it grew, different things? What are the factors? Why is the tree this direction? Is the wind naturally come from that way? Or is certain things? And it's like, and I needed to see if I could make artworks that I want, like for me it had to be that when I look at them, and like I'll generally not look at things very long after I make it, that I just have that little moment where like, okay, that's doing something, that is something like a tree blowing in the wind or something. And I think in a world, especially at the time when I started within the studio I'm in at the moment, I was working for Google, so I was working in back-end kind of advertising kind of systems within there. So I got to see all what is we think is the answer to our world is tech. It's not. It's all just another bunch of people typing beautiful code that is in the same way that they see it as beautiful as certain paintings. And I think it made me more fascinated with the basic thing is humans. How does a human brain work? How does human eyes see things? And even in those differences, what can be presented in front of that? And like the intellectual side, that's one aspect to it, but it's like I think there's so many artists have that question of how can music get to you and art can't. And because you can't read for 25 days before you get to go to see, say, document it. It's all theory-based kind of. There is painting in it, but someone just puts on a song and it hits you straight away. And there's no reading you can do to make it any better or any worse. It's just, okay, that's hit me. And there's one song that fascinated me for so long was Tiny Dancer. I couldn't find anyone who disliked it. You play it and everybody thinks they know it, they haven't got a fucking clue. Because that song is detached in how it's set up. And I got a bunch of death metal theory people singing Tiny Dancer one night. And I just kept on pressing repeat. And it was like, this song does something that's universal. I couldn't figure it out. So there's little things I've been chasing. And I think when the works in this show, they do this, they hum, they do something that is the tree blowing.
The universality of music as a base is certainly accepted by most, I would imagine. Yeah. So it's always a difficult one to equate because unfortunately we really don't have the same. Yeah. Or at least some of us most of us that don't have human beings in terms of just don't have the same desire to read the language that we're presented with ear for this. Yeah. It's not going to bring huge crowds in, but it's vital to our humanity in my for reading or for art. Your work, Robert's work, anybody's work, everybody's work here has an essential humanity and integrity about it. It also has the word we use as language. You can either read it or you can bother about it, or you need to bother about it. And unfortunately, most people don't bother. That's fine too. I don't. I don't have a problem with that.
I guess the connection is music because like there's just music's got a different kind of. It's within the society so strongly. Like pretty much, we're listening to music right now. We'll walk down the street, there'll be music in a shop, there'll be different music in a different clothes shop. It's hitting us everywhere, but it's a certain type of music. And then you basically throw, like I was talking to a friend of mine who's a musician, and we were just talking about different DJs and stuff, and then I was like, and I was for some reason a few weeks ago just constantly listening to Mozart. And I tried to take out Mozart out of what I had been brought up with, this elitist idea of like classical music, and I was like, just actually listen to it. And then you realize, okay, it's actually, there's something there. There's something more human, and that's, for me, what, like, when art is really good, it is the human thing. It's doing something that's, forget what you can write about it. It's doing something further than that.
But even this conversation
Yeah.
here, sorry to interrupt
Yeah.
you, like you can't. I didn't have these conversations in our college. I never had conversations like theory of like you talking about human beings or you know what I mean. Had a lot of theoretical.
So I did animation first.
Okay.
And animation industry is based around selling cartoons to kids. And they have to think this way because they have to think, like, say within animation, the eye-size relationship to the head is to do it like a 7-year-old child because they need to sell it to 7-year-old children. And they don't need, the child doesn't think, oh, well, I like this story because they just have to be bought in and sold it. And the color theories within it are to do with the young brain and how it works. So they've taught all this on a way of selling an idea or film and toys and all of this. So when I learned this in animation, I was kind of trying to bring it back into art. It's like, how do these things work? And Western kind of English or German kind of language is left to right, while Asian is right to left. And that's a huge problem within film because the idea of future and past in Western cinema goes this way and in Eastern cinema goes this way. So there's all of these things, and that's the human thing. That's not someone deciding. It's to do with that's how their brain is working. And even the idea that Eastern, there's a documentary I heard about why Chinese people save and Western people don't, because their connection to the future is different than our connection to the future. We detach ourselves from our future self while they're connected to their future self and they're saving for themselves, but we're saving for an imagined version of ourselves. And these are huge things like for me to think about when I'm making artwork. Because
I mean, you have to be careful when you bring in music.
yes.
I got a theatre piece commissioned in Glasgow a couple of years ago. That's work with the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland. So they provided the performers and the musicians. And the musicians don't see music because they're studying music in the same way that you were saying. We just hear it and it just is like automatic because they're coming at it from an educated breakdown. They're breaking it down all the time. And what I found was like they would see, let's say, a painting or whatever, and they'd have your response to the painting. The performers were very in tune with sculpture, you know. So I think when it comes to language, we can fetishize how we communicate these languages a little bit too much and romanticize them quite strongly, especially when it comes to music. Instead of really getting in under it.
My sister studied like quite heavy jazz, like bass and stuff. So it's quite mathematical in a lot of ways. And these conversations I've had with her, but I've noticed even when in art, I don't know, like if you play instruments.
I did, yeah, and I sometimes listen to mostly jazz actually or classical music in the studio. But I go through phases of listening to a lot while I'm working and then none at all. But I'm always interested in parallels between jazz music in particular because of the heavy, well, like you say, because it is systematized in some ways, but then the powerful part of it also is the improvisation and improvisations around themes that are echoed throughout and how musicians get lost and then find their way back to the place.
Thinking of Coleman is the one I'm thinking. The first person you're saying
yeah,
this. It's like there's freedom in his work.
Yeah, I've heard Brad Meldau live a few times, and I remember reading his liner notes for one of his early concerts in the Village Vanguard, and the liner notes are like quoting poets and stuff, and it reads like something that's talking about art in quite a sophisticated sort of way, but not in an overtly theoretical way, but kind of linking some of the impulses to do things in certain ways.
I think there's little tricks you can pick up from different forms.
Yeah.
Like if you're like, obviously there's a rhythm or there's a certain thing on your music. I do it all the time. I can be listening to techno for a month, hip hop for another month, and I'm like, the one instrument I can kind of play is drums, and I don't know, just something just simple about it. I never learned how to play them properly, but I played them enough to a point, and I think that rhythm goes through a lot of the way I work, and that's how I use little tricks to get myself to work through a day.
Yeah.
I think music can be that, and so like, and you're saying like, say, certain musicians are like trained, and they can be driven crazy with theory within 4/4, 5/4, like all these kind of things. But there's a certain thing that I think both artists, painters, and musicians can do when you get to a certain skill level within it, that you can just kind of fall and just, when you're about to make a mistake, you go, whoa, 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 okay, I'll stop, because you've done enough of it that you go, okay, I didn't plan this bit, but this kind of is working, and there's something going on. And
What I loved about doing this show was Mark Joyce brought in a painting, and you did as well. But Mark Joyce brought in a painting in the back room there, and he only painted it in the last week. He wasn't sure of putting it in, but he just painted it because he thought it fitted into the whole, I suppose, uncertainty, you know. And there's someone that knows the mechanics of paint. Like Mark Joyce, of all the people here, he knows the mechanics of paint. But he decided to put in this painting that wasn't like the other stuff he'd been doing. It's very disjointed, and they're kind of cut. It's like more collage, and they're kind of cutting into each other. But he dropped it down himself, put it on the floor, and said, "I'm not sure about this, but I think it fits like what you're trying to do here." So,
Theories of learning, isn't it?
yeah. Yeah, and like you as well, unsure of the paintings I selected. I think Damien said as well yesterday about me picking some works that he was like, you know. So there's this kind of like, do you find that like, are you always sure about the work you put out in the world?
No, we had this kind of talk in the studio. Like, I think from working in a gallery and stuff, and having to go to other people's studios, and that conversation, I gave up on it in some ways, and I was like, okay. So when you came to the studio, I was like, pick what you want. It makes no difference, because I know you're going to pick it in a certain context, and I know how I've made it. And yeah, if I trust the person, I'll be like, okay, yeah, this can be done. So I'm not, but it's kind of interesting that you're saying Mark Joyce. Sometimes your last piece is the piece you're like, yeah, I'm really happy with that. And that's, and maybe there's an aspect of that. But then like in 3 weeks' time, it's like, oh crap, I put in that piece, okay. But I think all artists have the last pieces to kind of like, yeah, I'm happy.
Well, it's the one you're closest to, but I mean, I think having doubt about your own work is really crucial. You know, I mean, I just think it's essential, and you know, I think it, you know, it's a risky business, kind of working up to a deadline for a show and just kind of getting it out and putting the work in, because you're. No matter how experienced you are, I don't think you're a reliable judge yourself as an artist, as to be able to say, of course you're going to be most excited about the last piece, but that may be faulty judgment, I think, you know, in lots of cases. I'm not saying it is in Mark's case. I think that's a really great piece, but yeah, I mean, I certainly I live with paintings for a long time in the studio before they come out, and it's like that one over there, like, is old, but it's like it's great for me to look at something that I did 5 or 10 years ago and kind of think, actually, it still holds up. I can still feel a connection to it, and I can still believe in it, you know. And I think to believe in things, it needs time, you know. And if a painting is any good, it needs time on the viewer's part as well, you know. So that, like, you could do something very flash that will make an immediate impact, and that will satisfy a moment, and it might even satisfy a show, and it might satisfy the critics, and you know, it might be fine. But actually, in the longer term, it might just not hold its own at all, you know. So.
There's something that's in my mind recently, because the National Gallery has reopened, and I've spent a lot of time there recently, and just between, say, going to different collections, and it's like, when I was going to the National Gallery a lot, I realised, all right, I go to the Hugh Lane a lot as well, and the Courbet especially in there, I was constantly looking at the Courbet, and I realised something. So you're saying this painting is like 5 years old. How much time have you spent looking at it?
Well, quite a lot, you know. I would have spent a lot of time looking at it when I'm making. I mean, I spend so much time looking at paintings as I'm making them.
Yeah, see, I don't do it that way. I kind of work. I don't. Yeah. Like, I do and I don't. I'm involved in it, But
Yeah.
that's why it's something with the Courbet, I kind of went, shit, I could be seeing this more than he had seen it, because he could have just moved on.
Yeah.
And I was just something really fascinating with the fact that, like, I was even looking at this show when I came down last week. It's like, maybe I'm spending more time on the work, looking at it as one finished, complete piece, than the artist is, and the actual. Because at that point where you're finished, you're like, right, and you nearly have to get away from it to not touch it again. But that finished kind of thing where you're looking at it going, okay. And I find it quite hard to look at my piece within a room like this, because I don't want to go near it in some ways. Like, I know what it is, and that's good enough for me.
What are I hate using the word what are the better paintings, for lack of a better word. I call them slow burners, like the painting that, like this, I've been here all week with these paintings, and some of them all of a sudden start to get on you. You know, at first they were like, okay, and then they start to take over from the other ones that were like, you know. So what's more important to you? Like, you both make or produce slow burners and ones that are much more, you know, the kind of zingers, the one that kind of go, oh yeah, I get that straight away, you know. The ones that on Instagram, they kind of go, boom, you know.
That depends on your state more than painting.
Could be.
It's a natural thing. It's so far as your whole notion of physical makeup and how you interact with the rest of the world and your colleagues and friends and your work. You know, some people are very shy, some people are very, you know, different traits. Going back to that word again, which Robert was touching on there, he almost sort of said, what I got from what you were saying there just a couple of moments ago, was that you were searching for the word humility. There's a certain sense in which, in the best sense of that word, that anybody that I've ever met in my life that's been any good at what they do are usually actually quite humble. The people whom I've met in my life, in, should we say, the arts, or theatre, or the arts in general, music, whatever, people who are halfway there, or have some kind of cachet in some area, never actually, they tend to be the people that I have found to be least honest. We're talking about kind of integrity again, I suppose there's something like that. You know,
There are different approaches, you know. I mean, the idea of integrity is kind of really interesting, and you know, the idea of slow burners and, you know, digging it out, excavating a painting, like de Kooning is, you know, several paintings were called excavation and stuff, and it's all about the hard won image and so on. And implicit in all of that is a notion of integrity and following stages and doing things, and it's all, you know, it's all terrific. Against that, I mean, there are other artists who make work very quickly, intuitively, do it in a sitting and walk away from it, and it can have a power. And you can't say that the one is better than the other. And I think lots of artists do it both ways too. So, you know, it's not an either or.
No, I totally agree, and I'm sure, you know, looking at your own practice, you probably can identify pieces that came about relatively quickly, let's just say, and pieces that were tortured for months. And I mean, I certainly found that walking into the studio after not being in it for a long time, I can very often find something on the floor which I had completely discarded. And I actually thought, Jesus, 3 months ago I did this thing. There's more going on in that than there is, you know, in the, you know.
think sometimes
you'll take on things like that. I think that's little sparks of things. It depends on your mood. Like some days, like I can be quite sensitive to just everything, and they're weird days in the studio where where I'm taking in information so much that I don't know how to present it back out. So I'll just organize things in my studio to try and get that out in some ways, but not. And then, like for working on paintings, like a lot of my work's on the floor. Just because of the materials, but I let the materials do their thing. So there's a lot of, like say with these ones, there's a lot of wicking, and and all of that happens when I'm not in the studio. So I set it up and I leave it, and then I have to work out what happened, and then I keep on doing this and doing this and doing this till it eventually does something. But that's why, like even me stepping away from that choice is kind of like you come to the studio and choosing works. Like it's not that I do trust myself in certain ways about what I like and what I don't like, but I don't trust what I like and what I don't like. That's the thing. Like I know when something's finished, but I don't trust that that's the right decision.
That's the terrifying thing about being a painter. Let's just say you're a painter. Because you're the master of your own world. It's your taste that judges when a painting is finished to go out into the world, but you're dealing with all the subjectivity. That one day you're feeling, as Connor put across there, it's a state of mind, a state of emotion, or whatever it is when you come in. So you're making this judgment on this thing, and a particular state of mind, and you're putting it out into the world, and so there's a lot. It's very unsettling in a way, or unstable, isn't it? It's not.
Yeah, like I did.
Years ago, I did a work where I forced myself. It must have been 9 years ago, so it would have been the last time I was very much painting, and I forced myself to do 50 paintings in 28 days. Beforehand, I'd have to get myself pissed off, so I had to read and read and read, and then the palette I gave myself, so I put myself in a certain scenario, and the palette I gave myself was all really colourful colours, so everything was like raw yellows, raw reds, and they were quite interesting, and I had I had a plan to do the other two. So one was called New Hope and No Hope, but they're spelled differently. And one was then to make myself happy and then make a lot of dark. But after the first version, I was so worn out, and it pissed me off. But there's that kind of something like painting like that. People go, oh, it's quite dark, but I don't have a notion what the hell mindset I was in, because that could have been one of 7 I was doing in one day, and the other rest of them could be yellows and stuff like that. And so emotion sometimes a portrayed motion can be different than an emotion that you're in while you're making something. So you might be pissed off but wanting to be happy, or you're happy wanting to be pissed off, and that's what can end up in an artwork. It's not necessarily that the emotion you're in translates into the artwork. So
I think it gets really tricky when you start talking about stuff like that.
yeah.
I mean, I think that's exactly the sort of stuff that gets painters a bad name or something, because it goes close to kind of romantic ideas or something like that, or that idea that you're putting your psyche into the work, or
but you are anyway, because
I know you are. You know what I mean? But it's really difficult to talk about that and not sound like you're talking utter tosh.
But
really.
we're okay with saying when someone plays a song, and if they're in a mood, and we're like, wow, that was the best time we've ever heard that song.
I love when.
But that's, I mean, there's a certain, there is a kind of there's a seriousness taken in one side. Like I've seen, say, John Martin play twice.
Yeah.
One time pissed off, one time completely hammered drunk.
Yeah.
And that was a huge factor to do with how he played. Drunk being better than pissed off. But I mean, but that's okay if we say it that way, but if you say within art, because I think you're ending up with it's not a record, it's a thing, it's an individual object. It's connected to an emotion.
Yeah. But I suppose what I'm getting at is a term called expressionism or something.
Oh yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's like, nobody in decent company, artistic company will use that term anymore. Almost.
But that might even change within a world that is consistently technology driven, which emotions are not allowed.
I know.
Or it's just thrown around.
Yeah.
And so they're only cycles within society.
I absolutely agree with you.
I was even concerned about the title of this exhibition, Soul Beating. in my previous cynical life, I would have said, oh, that's really, come on, stop beating, But I think there is, I kind of like it now, and I like where it comes from, where it's, a guy said it, Milton Resnick said it, and he was talking about how the difficulty of changing or shifting out of a kind of way of doing something. And but someone on a thread on Facebook said, God, it looks like a great show, but pretentious title. So I found that interesting, it gives that kind of, people are kind of like, no, you shouldn't talk like that around art. Art is much more kind of, it's much more serious,
Tell me your favorite 3 titles in the last 6 years of shows. So, I mean, is
always oxymorons. So
yeah, they're general.
Oxymorons. They back onto themselves and fold.
Yeah,
But does anyone have questions? Anyone?
It's just it's not to pick out words, Robert, but just doubt versus like critically engaged in your own practice. I struggle with the idea that bringing doubt into the work. I don't struggle with burning the work, but I just wondered if you see a difference between being critically engaged in your own work or doubting your work, or are they both the same? Because you mentioned belief then a few words later.
Yeah.
Connect doubt and belief.
Yeah. Well, I mean, sometimes, even though I've been painting for a long time, sometimes I stand in front of a rectangle and I've got paints laid out, I've got things, I've an idea what I might do, but I actually really feel I don't know how I'm going to do this, I start and it's a bit like it's a bit like de Kooning's Alzheimer paintings, really, that his assistant is reputed to have come in and put a few marks on a canvas, and then he would know how to start. And I kind of feel that the process is kind of like that anyway, that you begin somewhere, but you bring with you your experience and your lack of knowledge and your doubt. And then you also bring, I suppose, critical awareness as well, because as soon as the thing begins to start looking like something, then it's like, well, why is it looking like that? What does that mean? Where is this going? I mean, and all the articles you've read, all the artists you've looked at, all the stuff, the blogs, the interviews, all that, mercifully, a lot of that stays really far at the back of your mind if you're engaged enough with trying to make a piece at the time. But I think doubt and self-criticism have to be part of the package, as well as the other bits. I think it's kind of foolish. I mean, let's not forget that most artists are huge egoists. There's an element of you wouldn't be an artist if you didn't have a big ego, I think.
I always think it's a bunch of what is it like? What's the term when you're closed in? What is it?
That's one of those syndromes?
No, when you're just closed in, when you're just like there's both sides of humanity. There's one extroverts and introverts. I think like artists are like extreme introverts that have ended up going so far they end up as extroverts in some weird way. Yeah. Where most of them, you're like anyone I know who's an extrovert would be like, why the hell would you put yourself in a scenario where you're in a room on your own presenting yourself or what things you've done? Well, they couldn't do that. Yet they could swan into a room, say hello to everybody, be happy, yeah, and then. But I think most artists, I don't know any artists that are extroverts naturally. I think most of them are introverts, and it's like, and that's the kind of fallback. So it's like, so the doubt thing is constantly there, but you end up going so far in doubt, you've ended up making something.
But, yeah. But maybe I don't know. There are a lot of German artists that I really admire, and they're kind of very macho about the whole thing. They're very gung-ho about it. I don't know if there's much doubt involved in a lot of the practice of, people like Kippenberger and I don't know, a huge amount of those German artists do. I mean, I was reading about Lupertz recently, I don't know if Lupert's has much doubt about anything. But I mean, I can only talk about myself. I mean, I think having a really healthy skepticism about what you're doing and challenging what you're doing, changing your mind, painting over, scraping off, doing it again, all that stuff, that's all really important to try and find something that you can believe in. And there's that word again, but like, and it's like, but that's what you're after. You're after that sort of magic, really.
I didn't know that about the
About-
I feel most comfortable with found objects, and that's the same thing really. It's something that's arrived to me, and already that hurdle is gone. Or because I have a studio practice now, like you know, I won't work on anything that hasn't been marked by an accident or something in the studio to keep the fucking thing off, you know, that kind of way. But yeah, I didn't know that, but that's interesting.
Well, it was just at the end of his life.
Yeah, should have started at the end.
Just Robert, Kippenberg, yeah. We some years ago we travelled to Germany, and there was a rough walked out from School of Art here at the time, and there were a number of tutors on board, and none of them are here at the moment. But anyway, I was presented with this image of a skier, very tall, very massive painting, very large painting. Name I can't remember, but it was a skier. Does that resonate in any way with Kevin? Or I'll tell you, it was painted appallingly badly. For me, I can't remember one of the more senior and better educated tutors on the tour pointing out to me how wrong I was. I couldn't. I just thought it was the most. I mean, you suggested there that you're not sure just how much he invests. I mean, it looked to me like an image that was very cheaply arrived at, and I mean, it had a sickly sleekness.
Which is the whole generation of German painters in the 1980s that they deliberately did bad. What do you call it?
painting.
Bad painting. Yeah. So it's kind of a whole. There's one last question actually. Myself and Emma were talking today, and she said something about like Swankowski talking about how you shouldn't let, what was it, art and life? You can phrase it.
Don't give up. I can't paraphrase him, but just that he had committed everything really to his painting, and it was so prolific, and it was his whole life. And he was our external examiner when we were in NCD, and just he kind of said to a group of us to be careful with that you don't let as much as you commit to it, and you have to do that you don't kind of jeopardize your relationships with people or your I suppose relationships and humans are more important than things, I guess, was his main point.
I think he's an artist though who, I mean he always carried small notebooks and things. He was always on. Even though he was terribly good in the company of people and enjoyed people and stuff, so maybe he separated that, but he was like 100% artist too.
I suppose it's about commitment. My question is about this, the all or nothing thing. Being an artist, not having a job, having no money, just completely committed to the idea of being an artist. And not letting life get in the way, or any of these daily responsibilities that most people have. Like, do you think that's necessary to be an artist, or can you? What way do you feel?
Well, I have a job as well as being an artist, so I'm not the best person to ask that question, you know. I mean, you could ask me, how do I balance the two things? And I'm quite rigorous about, I work 4 days in the college, and I spend as much as I can of the other 3 days every week in the studio, and that's what I do. I'm very disciplined about it. I mean, I really admire all the artists out there who can't get teaching jobs or who have to find other ways of existing that are really difficult, because there is, you know, there's no money to be made in art in Ireland or anywhere really. I mean, apart from a tiny, small group of people. So it is. It's total dedication, and you have to. I mean, you have to want it so bad, and you know, I mean, you know, you have to be robust enough, and you have to have an ego that is going to drive you to do that, come what may, you know, and put up with the sacrifices and stuff, and then that leads you straight into an idea. You have to believe in yourself. So it's like, you know, it all becomes, it becomes very difficult if you don't have a network of support around you and other people who value what you do. You know, I think it's very difficult to carry on, because the rewards are really only, I don't know, the kind of the camaraderie that you might share with other artists and you know, the network that you're part of.
What do you think, Paul?
Well, I'm only in month 3 of not having a full-time job. So for the last 2 years, I've had a full-time job working 9 to 6, and then the minute I got in the studio, I gave myself the rule, because like my life is pretty focused on art at the moment. It has been for the last 2 years. So if I said to myself, if I was able to drag myself out of bed at 7 in the morning to get to work for 9, I was able to get from the studio from 6 and leave at 11. And I did that for 2 years. Saturdays were for getting materials and still working. And then at the moment, I'm trying to balance it out, where I get to the studio about 9 and I'll work till maybe on Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, I'll work till about 10 at night, with say a couple hours off in the afternoon. And then I'll see if I can get out of the city, because if I'm around the city, there's nothing better for me to do, and I'll end up, I'm like some sort of lost dog, I'll end up back at the studio, and I've left my house, and just like, and I'll go up here, and then I'll just find myself right outside the studio, and it's like, I'm here again. And like, it's good in some ways about being in the studio, but sometimes I can make too much work. Sometimes I can spend a day reorganizing my studio, cleaning it, and doing all these little tasks to kind of try and upset the way I work. But I think I can't think of any artist or anybody in any field that can get to any success without putting the time in. And it's like, and it was one of the weird things I noticed when I ran a gallery. So I had to put a lot of time and rebuild a building to get that gallery running in Waterford. And I had a few people around me, or different people kind of voicing that they wanted to be part of it. But every time I'd say, right, cool, you have to go clean the toilets, they'd be turned off and walk away. And I was like, well, if you don't have to do it, I have to do it. And then, so that everybody wanted the glory, but not the work. And I like the people that kind of would have worked in bits and pieces at the time. And I didn't question them, because maybe they just weren't into it. But it kind of got me thinking that, like, I enjoy the work part of it, the studio part of it is the reward for me. I like being there. So like the other aspect of like exhibitions are kind of hard. Talks are kind of hard, but like when I'm back in the studio, that's the reward. And even like I've gotten a chance to work with like quite a well-known artist, and that kind of opened my mind up to seeing someone who everybody assumes are like, just life is easy, they can afford everything. All he wanted to do was be in the studio, just in the studio, and that was the reward. The money didn't make no difference, because all he was thinking about was the next thing he's going to make and what he's going to do and how he can think. And that freedom of thinking, the money allowed it, but he was still in the studio. And we were hired from 9 to 5. He was there at 8 and he was gone at like 10. And if he wasn't in that studio, he was in another studio. If he wasn't there, he was flying around the world. And it was constant. It was all consuming, but he enjoyed it. And I got to see from that side, like maybe sometimes it can take over, but at the moment I'm trying to not let it take over so much. So I think the fact of doing other stuff is actually helping me work, because and I kind of think probably do need to get back to a job, because I think that focus of working made my studio time more valuable to me. Well, being 7 days a week, 24 hours a day can be kind of too much time in one little room. So, yeah, I think.
Questions? Anyone? Yeah. Anyone?
Just what Robert said, I have to want so much, but in my experience, it's what you want. It's not wanting so much, because we probably all want it so much, but it's not wanting all the other stuff that gives you the time to actually pursue it. As a shift in thinking, and I think it takes a huge amount of sitting down and thinking about your life, really. I think, because you can go anywhere in the world and create the time. There's plenty of places where you only need a pittance to get by on. But it goes back to that thing as well, like spending time with the work. I think the thing about needing a job to not make too much work, like, it's a fallacy. I think you have to be subjected to that torture in a way to get through. That's my experience so far. It's limited capacity.
There's nothing more pleasurable than being in the studio and just playing with stuff.
Yeah.
You know, it's like being a child.
So that's the reward.
Sticking your hand into a mud or something and just slopping around.
Yeah, and you only do that if you don't feel so focused on the time that you have. You need to let yourself go. You know, burn some work.
So what, let's end here. Let's be meta about and talk about talking about art. Is this difficult talking about painting? And is there any reward in it? Is there any pleasure? Is there any,
Right now, if this goes online, I'm not going to look at it, okay?
Okay. I know that.
So, yeah, it's
Good.
well, you don't hear the conversation
Yeah.
too often. You probably hear more philosophers being brought into art events than you do artists, and even they're like scared animals themselves. So I don't know. Yeah, I guess it was interesting listening to talk yesterday. Like even the tangents went off like about Instagram and stuff.
Why I loved about, and I wanted this today actually, because we went way too into the politics of the art world. Instagram was very, but I wanted a different tone today. I wanted something to kind of hit.
They're just part of.
Yeah.
That's life anyway.
Yeah.
I think I think the art, like making art, is more, or the ideas or concepts are kind of more what it is. Those other conversations can be for some blog on some website about the art market, about how certain big gallery owners are going to spend, like this thing at the moment. Last night I found that the new Rolls Royce has a gallery at the front of the car, so that they have a glass piece that you can put your artworks that you own behind it. 300,000 euros for a car. And what they then have in the Rolls Royce factory is artisans making horribly tacky flowers and stuff that are handmade. And they're like, you can curate your car, because these people are used to this kind of lifestyle. And I was fascinated with that. It's like, it's the cheapest curated space. It's the tackiest. It's going to be gold. And because stupid bloody like Rolls Royce Phantom, you're not going to have this much space to put in anything that's going to be, and I was so, I guess, it's funny, those conversations, like I think art market and stuff, they come and go. I think the artworks are different, and that's what I was saying, I'm spending a lot of time, say, in the National Gallery at the moment. Like their collection is a lot better than I remember it being. And for me, I like looking at work that old because it takes out market, it takes out politics, it just goes heart and soul for the actual art work and the ideas. Because we all know these are beyond priceless. It doesn't make a difference after that. Now it's about the work. And that's what I'm fascinated with at the moment, is looking back to points where works can be disconnected from this world. And I think like even the conversation of the artworks here, we're not into the art market or anything here. This is about the work, and I think the conversation is about the work today. So.
Can we wrap it up? Oh, yeah. Thank you.